Welcome, everyone. I'm Danny Bateman, and this is my life as a student with ADHD. So I am a teacher with ADHD, and I have lots of great things to share about our students that struggle with attention or struggle with hyperactivity. And the person who knows my ADHD the very best is my wife. So I have asked my wife, Donna, here is Donna, my wife, to join this session. Isn't this great? I get to do something with my wife today. And Donna will be asking lots of the questions, and she'll be kind of sharing some of her views on my ADHD. All right. Taryn is our moderator. Taryn was the moderator at my last session. And so yeah, I waved to everybody, Taryn. Taryn is a delight. I love having Taryn as a moderator because she laughs at my jokes. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. Okay, so let's begin. What is it? What is ADHD? Well, it stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It's characterized by three things. First of all, inattention. And so those with ADHD, they tend to daydream quite a bit. Their attention just kind of wanders. Hyperactivity. I don't know if you ever had really young children, but our young children, as soon as they got tired, they would start running around really fast. And it's kind of opposite with ADHD. Their brain is half asleep, but they're hyperactive. So how does that work? When you're half asleep, you're hyperactive? Well, the best explanation I have is watching our little 2-year-olds do that. And then the third thing that ADHD is characterized as impulsivity. You'll notice it isn't in the title. You know, we have hyperactivity and we have attention in the title, but impulsivity is huge. And so we'll be talking a little bit about how these three things affect students. And I'll be doing it in an anecdotal way. I'll be sharing my experience and my life, so to speak. Now, I did this in my last session. So there's a few of you that were in my last session, and I expect the few of you to give the right answer. So I'm going to ask you 4 simple questions with 1-word answer, and you need to say it out loud. If you don't say it out loud, and if you don't say it quickly, then you'll get behind. You got to be fast. Okay. So say it out loud, say it fast. What color is this owl? Say it.
White.
White.
Thank you. What color is this screen?
White.
What color is this?
White.
What do cows drink?
Water.
Those of you who went off mute to participate were super smart, because most people say milk. But those of you who went off mute may have been in my last session and knew exactly what was going on. I hope that some of you said milk. I didn't hear milk, but I hope some of you did. And the reason why is because of the impulsivity. Thanks, Brianna. I'm glad you admit to saying milk. Thanks, Andrea. So saying milk is what an ADHD student will do. Those who said water don't have ADHD. No, but what it is the brain is always looking for connections, and the ADHD brain is impulsive, and the impulsive answer, we all know that cows drink water, but the impulsive answer is milk. Now, what is Tracy saying? Yes, I know, even though you know it's water, you're stuck in this impulsivity, and that's the same with students that have attention deficit disorder. All right, so one of the things that you need to understand is that they are operating kind of subconsciously, that a lot of students with ADHD are relying on their subconscious, and that's what makes them impulsive. That's what makes them inattentive. Here's a little video about what happens in the brain with ADHD brains. Attitude is an excellent website. So you just Google Attitude, ADD, and it's not ATT, but ADD, and it's fabulous. Now that video kind of helps us understand that it's a neurological disorder. It is physical. It is a brain that physically has different levels of the neurotransmitters, right? And here's what we find. We find that we can measure brain waves, and brain waves are easy to measure with EEGs, put on the head, and they'll watch the ADHD person's brain, and they're usually at a theta or delta level. They'll be awake, but their brain is half asleep. So almost always their brain is operating at a theta level. And that's why one of the best medications for students with ADHD is some sort of stimulant, be it, the medication is really helpful because it wakes up the brain. So here's some common indicators. And by the way, these are indicators of all children ages 1 to 6, right? And so you can't really figure out ADHD until they get a little bit older. But guess what? They're at the age when they're going to school that you start to see that these don't go away. And that is a lack of focus, poor time management, weak impulse control, exaggerated emotions, hyperfocus, hyperactivity, executive dysfunction. Taryn teaches kindergarten, or has taught kindergarten, I don't know, right, Taryn? And the great thing about being at this session, Taryn, is that all of your students have these indicators. And so the strategies that I can give you, Taryn, can be helpful for all of your students, not just those with ADHD. So the younger students really struggle with all of these. All right, over to Donna.
So Danny, when did you figure out that you have ADHD?
Well, I was in a convention session just like this. I was about 35 years old, and they went through all these indicators that I just went through, and I'm like, check, 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 check. And so I kind of self-diagnosed and said, I think I have ADHD. However, when I was diagnosed, right? So I figured it out when I was 35, but I wasn't actually diagnosed till I was in my late 50s. So, and the reason why I got diagnosed is because I was struggling, and I thought, well, let's see if for sure. And then the psychologist gave me medication, and I was able to find out, how helpful that was.
So what was it like growing up with ADHD?
Everything was fine except school, right? I just loved life. I was active. Here's me in grade 10 with my hair. I love it.
Cute hair.
Yes, thank you. Back when I had it. So I just really loved life. I was very active, rode my bicycle everywhere and skied and just was active outdoors. And I just loved my life except for school. School was a chore. School was very, very tedious and boring. So everything was good except for school. And there were moments in school when it was cool and exciting. And so that's what I'll share with you today.
So what are some strengths of people with ADHD?
Do I have any strengths? Tell me what
you have lots.
Okay, well, what are some of my strengths?
So Danny should have been born an explorer, because he is what I call an intrepid adventurer. When we love to travel, and when we travel, he goes exploring, and I can, unpack or have a little nap or whatever. And he comes back, he's like, oh, I've got all these great things to show you. And so I don't have to worry about that. He does all of the reconnoitering. He's lots of fun. He's not boring. Lots of energy. willing to take risks, but with those risks come lots of problems. But he's an excellent problem solver. He's had to learn to be an excellent problem solver. And I like don't make that many mistakes, so I panic when I do. He's not like that. He just rolls with it, figures it out, moves forward. He can be very focused and very single-minded about some things. So like if I need to talk to him while he's watching a movie, I have to, pause the movie and get his full attention. Looking at your list, very resilient. He can just kind of roll with things. Did you want to go
So
through
I
more?
have to tell you about Donna. She's the opposite of ADHD. Doesn't take risks. She's very calm. She's very organized. She thinks through things carefully. And so I think, she's very left brain. I'm very right brain. And together we make a whole brain. It's a good thing we love each other because we are so different. But I would not be the man I am, the person I am without her. Like she has really helped me find strategies to manage this thing, and it provided a sounding board for my crazy ideas. Like, I'll have this great idea, at least I think it's great. And she'll go, no, that's not a good idea. We do not want to live in a travel trailer. Sorry, buddy.
In Edmonton in the winter. No. Some kids once gave him a card and it said, leave no fun undone. And I'm like, that's a fairly good life motto for Danny, because he likes to do things and have a lot of fun. And my life is better because of his fun.
So I bring fun into her life, and she brings constancy and all kinds of organization into my life, and thoughtfulness too, right? So she is so thoughtful and conscientious. My, oh my. All right. So keep that in mind, that we all have strengths. We all have things that we're good at. And if we can kind of focus on those strengths and build on those strengths, life is better. And I used to have this at the end of the presentation, and I got feedback that this was the best part of the presentation. And I also recognize that, hey, this whole presentation is about building on strengths of students that have ADHD.
So what made school such a struggle, and what helped you to be more engaged and less bored?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So movement, right? Anytime one of the things that I used to do a lot is go to the bathroom. When I was in elementary, I would constantly be going to the bathroom. And I realize now, I didn't realize back then, but I realize now I needed to move. And so I wouldn't have to pee that badly, but guess what? I could use it as an excuse to move. Well, you might talk to your students and say to them, hey, why don't you go to the bathroom? Well, I don't need to go to the bathroom. No, I think you should go to the bathroom, right? It's a great strategy, right? Just to move. We're going to talk about a walk box. My wife says, well, what about the walk box? I'm like, what? Chinese food in the classroom? What are you talking about? Anyway, we'll
Different kind of walk.
we'll get to that. Anytime I was learning by doing, it was better. And so I gave this as an important strategies for practical strategies for struggling students, is to have very little instruction time and lots of time on task, because my time on task, I was learning. If you were talking at me, I was not learning. It was just not happening. I was interested in lots of things. And actually you'll find, I think everybody with ADHD has, well, everybody in the world has areas of high interest. But when an ADHD student gets going on something, they can get hyper-focused on an area of interest. Unfortunately, that area of interest for a lot of students these days is video games, and they can hyper-focus on video games. Well, let's find something else besides video games that they can hyper-focus on, right? And fortunately, I could hyper-focus on things other than video games. And now I never had video games when I was younger. And Now I hate video games because my grandchildren outplay me. All right, so choice, lots of choice would help me. I'll never forget my English teacher who gave lots of choice all the time. And she said, okay, for this assignment, you can sing a song, you can do a dramatic production, and this was about Macbeth, right? You can write an essay, you can answer these questions. She gave me all of these choices. Well, guess what I did? I acted out a scene. I got a partner and we acted out a scene from Macbeth, and I got a 90. I never got 90s, right? Because I had ADHD. By the way, I'm seeing things in the chat box. Really feel free to contribute in the chat box. Taryn is reading that for us, and Donna will be reading it and saying I need to go get a drink. You know, that's a little nicer than I need to go pee, right? Okay, so unique and novel experiences. Anytime Taryn, put on your nose because this session hasn't seen your nose. Anyway, anytime something unique and novel comes up, I would pay attention. I would just be there. So I don't see your nose, Taryn. There it is.
Love it.
See, Donna hasn't seen your nose. That is awesome. But that's what I mean. Unique, novel, just some sort of prop. I have glasses and hats, all kinds of weird glasses and hats. I have costumes. I have, you know, like just unique, novel things. I remember we had experiments. I loved experiments. It was doing something, right? And it was unique. Guest presentations, I always paid attention to because this was new, this was novel, this was unique, especially if they didn't go on and on, if they had something interesting. Food and drink, I don't know if you can bring food and drink into your classroom, but I'll tell you, anytime I could eat or drink, I was like engaged. So, and stories, I could picture stories, and stories were memorable, and I just loved it when there was a story. I could hyper focus on a story.
And Geraldine in the chat says students love when I use different voices. So yeah, kind of dramatization, make it interesting, change it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And Jenna asked, did you find that the time of day affected your focus? Like, was that tied in at all with your ADHD?
What a great question.
Yeah.
That is an awesome question, because absolutely. Here's what happens. I wake up in the morning and my brain is awake and I can do stuff. And in the afternoon, I'm not learning. I found this out when I had intensive learning at the university level. I could learn in the morning like that, and then my brain seemed to wear out through the day. And the later it got, the worse I was at thinking. By the time it was evening time, I could not even think straight if I was thinking a lot during the day. Now, that's me. I think different people are different. But I think an awake brain is the key here. So thank you for that question. Wonderful question. All right, group work. I love being in groups and talking. You know, I love talking so much. I developed a career around talking. Right? So educational games, any kind of game and contest, right? And guess what? It doesn't have to be a real game. You can just say, this is a game. You know, it's actually an assessment you're giving them, but change it into a game. Taryn, go ahead.
Yeah, they're just on the time of day question. Dawn followed it up with, how did the time of day that you had phys ed affect your behavior? Right? Because sometimes, well, teachers can't really choose when they have their phys ed classes, but.
Yeah, no, if you can be active, the afternoon is best. So the morning, like I say, through the day, it wears on, and you can kind of figure that out from my comment that if I had movement in the afternoon, then I could come back from that movement and focus just a little bit better. My brain was a little bit more awake. So yeah, good question. Good follow-up question.
And Grace, thanks for mentioning that during COVID, you take your students outside once a day in the afternoon. Danny used to do that with his students, and they could have a longer lunch break. This was a little bit different than a traditional setting. They could have a longer lunch break if they went on a walk. as a group.
And if
and
they
it-
didn't go on a walk, they had to start working.
They all wanted to walk, and they were all better for it.
Sometimes it was cold or whatever, and I'd have students stay in and work, but I love that. Okay. Oh, is that it? Okay. I guess next question.
Were there any subjects that were not boring? And what else did you struggle with in school?
I loved drama. Love drama. It was movement. It was creative. It was engaging. Guess what? I became a drama teacher.
I knew that. He's also really good at memorizing, so if you have a soliloquy or something, he could focus and practice. I can't do that. I gotta have prompts, but he could do it.
If I'm hyper focused or it's of high interest, like drama, learning lines, yeah, I could learn lines very well. So just because I have ADHD doesn't mean I'm dumb, right?
No.
I mean, I'm intelligent. I can learn, but sometimes it's a real pain to learn. And so what I struggled with is lecture the very most. And I also struggled with directions, because a teacher would give directions and then everybody would start to work and be on task, and I'd be like, what are we doing? And I'd ask another student, or I'd look her up. Go ahead, Taryn.
How did you feel about background music while you were working? Was it too distracting, or was it something that you helped in some way?
Wow, that's an interesting question. There are students who are auditory learners, and they put on their headphones and that takes their attention. For me, it really, music was only background, because I was not an auditory learner. Auditory learning was my lowest. I could have music on and it would set a mood and it was great. But I've also had students that it takes their total attention. And so I would say it's different for different people, depending on whether they're an auditory learner or not an auditory learner. I wouldn't recommend having music in the background as an auditory learner, because your attention is constantly going there. Me, I could have that on, and I loved having music in the background, but I don't recommend it universally.
Okay, that was my question.
We have a grandson who is 7 in grade 2, who has pandas and some sensory issues, and having music in the background, even like at Christmas dinner, I said to my daughter, so what do you think about some Christmas music? She's like, well, let's try it. And then 30 seconds later, she's like, yeah, no, that's too much for him.
Too much stimulus, right?
But having said
And
that,
I was wondering if you were feeling the same way, because sometimes, like if I assign an assignment and I'm walking around and helping the students, I teach grade 7, by the way.
Yep.
And lots of times they'll ask for music in the background. Can you put on music? And I have my Bluetooth speaker, so I do use it quite often.
Yeah.
But there's one kid in particular that I feel like it's almost too stimulating for.
Yes.
Something comes on that he knows, and that's it. I've lost him.
Yes. Yeah. And so
For some kids, though, we've used like headphones to kind of mute sound. So even if they just have on mute, like instrumental music or whatever. So I think what you're saying is exactly spot on, in that it varies from one student to the next.
Thank you so much, Dawn. And here's the beautiful thing about our technology today is we can have those muting headphones on the kids that really need the quiet. They're fantastic. But we also have earphones that some students, they learn really well with some music in the background. So they can have their little Bluetooth earphones, right? Or whatever it is. And like lots of teachers are like, take those earphones out, that's terrible. Well, it is terrible if they're easily distracted or if they're overstimulated, but it is not terrible for someone like me. I love having that music while I learn. It sets a mood for me, and it's great. So.
And this, like one of the things I always do with my class at the beginning of the year is get them to develop a playlist. And then I download the music from Apple and I'm playing the playlist in the background. This is the first year that I can see that, because of this one student, it's not as great as it has been the past couple of years.
Yes, and so good for you, Dawn, for recognizing that. It really is important to figure out individuals and how they are learning and whether they get overstimulated and whether they have ADHD, et cetera, et cetera.
And personally, I have music that I call my thinking music. For example, Il Divo, and lots of it's not even in English, but I play that loud and over while I'm writing and working, and it helps my brain. But that's not always the case. But I would say still use music. I'm thinking more elementary, like Flight of the Bumblebee. Like take a break, get everybody up and moving real fast and get the blood flowing. So there are different ways to use music.
And you know, everybody uses music in elementary. You elementary teachers, you use it, but secondary teachers, take a little note from Dawn in her grade 7 class, because music at the secondary level is powerful. It's a powerful way to learn. And you know what? Auditory learners really learn well through music. It just can't be learning something else besides what the music is. Does that make sense? And so you can use music as a way to learn. And the brain research says they will remember it way better with music than without. They will remember it way better with movement than without, et cetera, et cetera.
So what helped you to listen and follow directions?
Oh, I don't know. Let's find out. Hearing them over and over. Oh, this is gold. If you don't do this, do this. Put it up on the board. I just love like knowing where we were and where we were going. And because I never knew. Right. I never heard where we were going and what we were doing. So yeah, and then make sure it's visual for your students to refer back to over and over again. All right. Is somebody off mute? I'm hearing some background noise. I'm just gonna, there's a way to mute everybody. Let me see if I can figure out what it is. Mute. Oh. Yeah. Whoops. Now I muted myself.
I know.
Did I mute myself?
I don't think so.
No, I didn't. Good.
Yeah.
Yay. We found mute all. Thanks, Donna, helping me find mute all. All right. So visual prompts, anything visual that they can refer back to. What is it that we're doing? Okay, and what's next? You know, and you can look at the list on the board or whiteboard or whatever.
Or the pictures.
We've talked about less talking as a teacher, more talking as a student, though, right? Kind of, and then making sure that I understand, especially quietly, one-on-one. You know, I don't want to admit that I have no clue about what's going on. Anytime I had one-on-one, I had to pay attention, and I was there one-on-one, right?
So what helped you with your executive functioning skills?
You.
So the first year we were married, like every day, I'm talking every day, people, he would lose his watch, his wallet, his keys, something important. And so finally, after repeated days, I'd say, look, you need a bowl or put them on the shelf. You need the same place when you walk in the door, put all your things, because then they're there when you leave and you have them all. And I used to have a little count system. Do you have your lunch? Do you have your wallet? Do you have your watch, your keys? And now it's a phone.
So not only would I lose them, but I'd forget to bring them along with me as I left the house, right? So.
Danny, that kind of ties into this question from the chat. Leslie was asking, when you were newly diagnosed, how did it impact you? Because they were just diagnosed at 33 and they're having some puzzle pieces getting jumbled around.
I loved being legitimate, right? Like many of us that grew up, like I'm 61. And so I was in elementary in the 60s, junior high and high school in the 70s. There was no such thing as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, no such thing at all. They used to use hyperactivity as a term, but there was no diagnosis. And so I have had this my whole life and had no clue what it was until I was 35. That was really helpful, an epiphany there. And then when I was 50, to get diagnosed, all of a sudden, I felt legitimate, and all of a sudden I knew that for sure I was, and all of a sudden it answered like why I was so dumb when we were first married, right? I just felt
You weren't dumb. You
no,
were just
but I felt
forgetful. And
You were
why I
just
was-
first married, Danny.
yeah, well, you know what? I felt dumb my whole life until I figured out that I'm not dumb. I just have trouble paying attention. I felt like I was dumb at school because I hated it. I felt like I was dumb at the beginning of our marriage because I just couldn't even keep track of things. I just felt dumb. And so all of a sudden the diagnosis says, you're not dumb. You have attention deficit and you're a little bit hyper, but and so, and then what a legitimate diagnosis did is allowed me to get medication. And the cool thing is most medication you have to take for a month or 6 weeks until it kicks in and you see how it works. No, not with ADHD medication. It's a stimulant and it is there like now. And then it goes away after usually 10 hours. It usually lasts 10 hours. And so, before you take it, what it's like, after you take it, what it's like. And I have a son-in-law with ADHD, and my wife or his wife, not so much my wife, but his wife knows exactly when he's got his medication, when he doesn't. She knows it like now. Anyway, and then guess what? I have a Saturday. I don't need my medication. I don't take it. And I know exactly what I'm like without my medication. So I love having that option of having a choice to medicate myself. If I know that I'm going to be doing sessions like this, I medicate myself, right? If I know I have to study hard or I have to write something, I medicate myself. So Taryn and Donna are going to read through Madison and Hannah, it looks like to me. I'm just going to say it that way. Okay, I need this. Oh, here we go. So as Donna mentioned, having like these explicit procedures really help me. Let me just move that. Whatever. Here's I'm just trying to, I know I need to grab it at the top.
right.
Just having regular routines and procedures really helps. And you can do that in the classroom with all of your students, right? And then explicit teaching and help with organizational skills, accommodations. Figure that out. There we go. Oh. There we go. Sorry, trying to mute somebody. Okay, and then last but not least is nonverbal. It's not so embarrassing, right? Like the teacher would come along and point at my book and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be doing, So it wasn't embarrassing. It was just me and the teacher. And anytime you can do just me and the teacher is fantastic. I work really well under deadlines. I think a lot of people with ADHD are excellent procrastinators. We are just so good at that. I've tried to teach my wife to procrastinate our entire marriage. We've been married 38 years. She still hasn't learned. I don't know. It's just now, sometimes it pays off, very rarely, right? Very rarely does procrastination pay off. But when it does, I'm always pointing at it. See, if we had procrastinated, we would have had to do all that work for nothing. Kind of thing. All right. Anything from the chat box, Taryn or Donna?
Madison says one of my students is very disorganized, always has their belongings around the room and on the floor. Do you have any tips?
Oh, can't you tell students that struggle with learning because their organizational skills, they have things everywhere, and that's me too. And the tip is routines and procedures. Just like Donna had to teach me to put things in the bowl when I walk in the door and to take things out of the bowl when I walk out the door. Just that routine is really, really helpful. And that's why it's number one on this list. So great question. Elementary teachers are excellent at doing this. Secondary teachers, not so good. Secondary teachers, talk to an elementary teacher and say, what kind of routines and procedures do you have? Or come to my next session, 11:20. So we're going to run out of time here, aren't we? Come to my next 11:40. Good. We have till 11:20. Anyway, so come to my next session and I'll talk a little bit more about routines and procedures. Any other thing from the chat box, Taryn?
There was a question just wondering if you would suggest someone reaches out to try to get diagnosed if they are a teacher who believes that they have ADHD.
Okay, I'm not quite sure I understand, so I'm trying to.
Are you
So
asking-
if I think I have ADHD, what would you say? Do you think I should go to the doctor and seek out a diagnosis? Or do you think I should just continue working along with whatever strategies I think work for me for now?
I recommend if you think you do, I recommend going and seeing a psychologist, and then you get that legitimacy that I talked about. I never felt like sharing it with other people. It took me a long time to have the courage to do this session. I just didn't want them to know I was bad at organizing and had poor executive functioning skills. And guess what? I would not tell my administrator that I have ADHD, but I could have a few more options with being diagnosed legitimately. And the biggest option is that option of medication, which is fabulous. I've tried like 4 different kinds of medication. And by the way, there's this, I'll shut up. There's keto pills, these keto pills that you can buy.
Never mind.
They
Keep going.
have caffeine. They work just like medication. It's amazing.
So the process is go see your family doctor and they refer to a psychologist.
Yeah, little sidetrack.
Psychiatrist.
Little sidetrack there. Oh yeah, not a psychologist. Sorry, I said psychologist. It needs to be a psychiatrist. Psychologists cannot prescribe, psychiatrists can, and usually your doctor can refer you to a psychiatrist.
So what helped you the most with your learning?
Here's a list of things that are for you to do with your students, because they work for me, but they work for my students, and they will work for your students. And what is that list? A relationship. I remember those teachers, Mr. Effler and Mr. Rogers and Mr. Smith. Why are they all? Oh, there must have been a female in there somewhere. Anyway, so I remember these teachers because I had a rapport with them. They seemed to get me. And any teacher who seems to get me, or at least like me, I don't feel so dumb in their class. It really helped with my learning. So I would say that's number one, is to establish a good working teacher-student relationship. And this is how they did it. They talked to me and they took interest, they encouraged me, they involved me, they helped me feel like I belong. You get Jody Carrington, right? So you know Jody Carrington. She is gold. Like, she is your keynote. You've got to, I think these sessions are being recorded. You've got to listen to everything Jody has to say, and you've got to read her book. And I love this light up when you see them. So this relationship rapport that really helped with my learning, it's what Jody talks about quite a bit. And if you want to get better at it, listen to Jody. What else does she say? Show genuine interest in things they care about, eye contact, stay present with them, all of these things. And isn't it kind of cool that she's speaking at their convention?
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right.
So how did ADHD affect you as you got older?
You tell me. You've been with me 38 years. How does it affect me?
I think that you have learned strategies that work for you.
Yeah.
And if you could see, this is an office and we each have a desk and our computer set up and whatever. His desk is pretty clean and mine is piled with papers and things to do. So it's sort of opposite to what you might have expected, but the clear desk and the order really helps him function better.
And believe me, I spent most of my career living in a mess. And so I had to learn how to clean, how to tidy, how to organize. Let's see what else we have on the list here. I don't know what this is about. Like,
okay, you wanted me to talk about these.
Oh, did
so
I?
We already talked about the losing things. It still happens, but he does have that bowl on the shelf by the back door for his keys and things. And
it's not as bad.
It's not as bad. He's got organizational skills in place.
I have to say something about you.
Okay.
Don't you think she's an excellent looker?
Uh,
She is a looker. She can find anything. After 38 years, she is the greatest looker ever.
the kids and my husband call me at work, Mom, do you know where my, and I be rolling my mental eyes thinking, I'm at work, I am not there. Try looking here, and it's usually there.
It is like she is the best looker everywhere. I can't find it, and she'll find it, and I'll be like, but I looked there.
But I'm a visual learner and I remember those snapshots of things. But in any case, the organizational skills, sometimes it's just the routine of the day. Sometimes it's setting alarms on a phone.
Yeah.
It's keeping the calendar updated. And helping with time management too. All of those things help. Procrastination, sometimes he just needs a little reminder. Hey, did you get that in? Did you pay that bill or whatever?
It's hard because those of us with ADHD, often we don't feel like it, right? I just don't feel like it. And we kind of have to learn to make ourselves do things that we don't feel like. University, I don't know.
I'm not sure what you were thinking.
I don't know either.
I think that you loved when you worked on your master's,
Oh,
that you had
yeah.
so much choice,
Yeah.
that you had a lot of seminars, that you were able to discuss topics, and then your paper was written on things you were interested
I
in.
chose everything of high interest in my master's. And so as my university career progressed, I got better and better marks. I got married, so I got better marks for that.
Better learning strategies.
Better learning strategies. I got better and better, but I really loved my master's, my postgraduate work, because I chose things that I was interested in. So.
And what other strategies helped you as you got older?
I think we've talked about most of these. So establishing good habits, because I will often run on automatic pilot. I just do things without even thinking. I just run on this automatic pilot. So if the habits are good habits, then that automatic pilot is awesome. I try to move more consciously. As a matter of fact, we were waiting for the session to start. And I said to Taryn, didn't I? I said, I gotta move. I need to move a bit.
And it's been tricky teaching online during COVID and not moving around the classroom. It's just sitting in front of the computer. That's been kind of hard. But after a class or a session, if he has a break, he'll just go for a walk in the neighborhood, go around the block. And sometimes I go too, but.
I did 3 sessions yesterday at teachers' conventions, and I walked before, and then I had to walk in between, and then I had to walk afterwards. So movement, getting help is really helpful. That's where you come in as a teacher. You can help these students get organized. Establishing systems for myself and using technology to use those systems. Oftentimes people will say, can you do this? And I'll say, send me an email, right? That really helps me, or send me a text. And then I have it and I can be reminded of it. Taryn, go ahead.
Just a couple things from the chat. Someone was asking, what are some of the red flags in your mind that a student who has ADHD needs a break?
Restlessness and body language. You can tell when they're not looking at you and when they're fidgeting. Sometimes they're fidgeting and paying attention. And so don't worry too much about that. But the more engaged they are, you will see, it will be clear body language wise. And I would just use that age. Oh, I didn't teach that this session, but they have an attention span for about as many minutes as they are old. And so if they're 10 years old, try to give them some movement at 10 years old, every 10 minutes, right? That's just a guideline. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do that consistently, but good question. Thank you for that question.
And Nicole was wondering if you had any tips to help convince a teacher that some of these things might be necessary for their own personal child.
Oh yeah, like experiment with your own children. These things all help. Teach them organization, teach them procedures, teach them how to use phones or technology to develop systems for themselves, and get them to see a psychiatrist just to be sure. Who knows, right? And then medication is an option. And I really love the way I handle my medication, because I know what I am like with it, and I know what I'm like without it. Donna mentioned how often she reminds me, and just a bell that rings, a voice that says, a teacher that taps on the page, you know, these reminders are really significant, really helpful.
So how does ADHD affect you as a teacher?
I think that teachers with ADHD are better. We're better than the rest of you. No, I'm just teasing. I really think that we are better for lots of things, because we're energetic. We know not to be boring, because we have been bored. and we can also relate to those that are bored and try to create lessons. And I find that I'm teaching, and ADHD is no problem when I'm moving and talking. And so I'm in the classroom, I'm moving and talking, I'm hyper focused on the students. And guess what? I think I can teach really well with ADHD without medication. I use medication when I have to do something that's sitting and listening or viewing. But when I'm teaching, I don't need medication. And I didn't for 30 years, right? I know that because I taught for 30 years. I think that those of us who struggle, we can do new and novel things and be creative. And I mentioned, empathy for all struggling students and opportunities to be creative and innovative. And so those of you who have ADHD, or those of you who think you have ADHD, I think you're in the right profession. And you're probably bored silly right now. I apologize. It's been a big lecture. I'm really sorry, but guess what? You just turn off your video. Oh, none of you have it on anyway. Anyway,
Walk around the room.
And walk. Go ahead, Taryn.
Yeah, there's another one that just came in that I think is an awesome question. What tips might you give to a teacher who needs to start a conversation with a parent that their child is showing signs that they have ADHD?
Well, the way you worded that question was perfect. It was perfect. So thank you for that question. This is a good conversation to have. And you can even use me as an excuse. You could say, oh, I went to this session on ADHD and I'm kind of wondering, you're not a psychiatrist. You can't diagnose. But I love the way that question's worded, because you can certainly share some signs, and you can say to them, you know your child at home really well. I know your child at school really well. And you and I, we both want what's best for your child. And I'm wondering if it might be helpful to see a psychiatrist about ADHD, and say it. Don't be afraid to say it, because they'll never know what they're going to their psychiatrist about unless you say it. And you can even use me as an excuse. Say, I just learned about it and I'm thinking maybe. So please check it out. And the speaker I heard, well, you may or may not want to say this part. The speaker I heard said that medication really helps, but you can say that after they're diagnosed too, as they make that decision. Do I go to medication or don't I go to medication?
And unfortunately, medication sometimes has a bad connotation, but really I see medication for most things as being a tool for success. Someone's asking how important ADHD medication is in your life. I think it would have really helped your school experience as a child and a teen.
I've mentioned that it really helps me learn. And when I'm trying to focus on getting something into my brain, medication is invaluable. And so I don't think you need ADHD medication at home. Like when you have choice and you can follow what you're interested in, and you can just kind of run on automatic pilot and move and do, I don't think medication is necessary, but if you're sitting and trying to learn, wow, that medication can be so helpful. And so that is how it's been helpful for me sitting in this Zoom call, for all this time. It's really, really helpful. So.
And it's unlike other medications where you need to have a certain length of time for it to be effective or whatever. He can take it one day and not another day or whatever. So that's been helpful. I have to say that one of the first days he took medication, he opened the fridge and he's like, wow, I'm seeing everything that's in the fridge. And I'm like, did you not do that before? Anyway,
and
interesting.
that was when I was in my late 50s. Like it took a long time before I figured out, hey, this might help. And I wish that I had known that sooner, as Donna says.
Okay, so what strategies do you use with your students who have ADHD?
This is the most helpful slide, and so you might want to take a photo with it. I've talked about getting to know them, wait time, give them a chance to think and process. Sometimes, especially when they're on the spot, they need lots of time to process.
Maybe restate your question.
And even encourage them to just think for a little while. Oh, don't answer so quick, just hold it, think about it. And so you actually have to encourage them to take wait time sometimes. We've talked about movement breaks. We've talked about a little bit about goal setting, but really I find that if I have a goal around something, that it helps me with my procrastination. The best thing is a goal that's broken up into little tiny steps. First I do this, then I do this, then I do this. And hey, here's what might happen at the very end. They will be the first to turn in their assignments rather than the last. And so sometimes it's like, no, take your time and I will give you more time. Don't be in a rush, to help them not to rush. Students with ADHD love to fire their brain, and they can hyper focus when they're given a chance to just share whatever's in their brain. Not everyone, but a lot really like brainstorming, and I sure did. I love just coming up with ideas, as many ideas as I could, and not have those ideas, evaluated, like put down, basically.
So group work was good for that.
Oh, I love group work. Breaking the learning up into small little chunks, giving me feedback. Some students, positive feedback, right? Like, tell me when I'm doing something well, and I'll just keep doing it forever. I've talked about more teaching, less teaching and more learning, like less talking and more time on task. I love signals, like just they get my attention, and it might be just a signal to do something else or to do this or do that, so interesting visuals. The teacher would come in and show me Gertrude, the cow, and all of a sudden I would be paying attention. So, all right, please, if you have strategies that work well with students that have a difficulty with ADHD, please write them in the chat box. Anything else from the chat box, Taryn, that we need to talk
I was
about?
asking about strategies for students who are ADD inattentive.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And I don't know how to get to that slide. Let's see if I have it ahead. No, I don't think I have it ahead. Dang it. No. Okay. I'm gonna stop sharing. Sorry, I just have to do this. I'm going to go back to a slide that's right at the very beginning, and I thought maybe I had it again at the end. But this is such an excellent question from my very first slide. So I've just gone back to the very first slide, and I'm just going to share that first slide with you. Okay, so here's the three things that it's characterized by. However, there's three diagnoses. There's inattention hyperactivity disorder. That's one diagnosis. There's ADD, attention deficit, as another diagnosis. And there's hyperactivity impulsivity as another diagnosis. So basically you can have all three as a diagnosis. I lean more towards just inattentive and less towards hyperactivity impulsive. but I think I'm pretty high there. It's just, I have 100% on the inattention checklist, and I have 80% on the 70%, 80% on the hyperactivity impulsivity checklist. And I really think I've brought my hyperactivity under control through the years. Year after year after year, I've had to like suppress. Anyway, but there are those who you don't recognize as having ADD because it's not hyperactive. The hyperactive, you know them. They stand out like crazy and you see them right away. But they're most of the strategies and the struggles I've shared with you help with the inattentive diagnosis, because that's my main diagnosis is inattention. All right, so keep that in mind, that there's these 3 diagnoses, and if you can find out if they are diagnosed, which one of them, that's really helpful. Usually you can tell yourself because you'll be like, I think you have the hyperactivity diagnoses. Okay, tell them about our daughter-in-law while I get the slide back to the right slide.
So one of our daughters-in-law is an OT, occupational therapist with Edmonton Public Schools. She works with elementary students mostly, and goes out and assesses and observes and makes recommendations. So Danny asked her, when he first came up with this workshop last year, what are some things that you'd recommend? So there's just a few things, and he's just bringing up the slide here. You've covered a lot of things.
Yes.
Okay, here we go. And so here's some things she suggested, but he's also worked with a lot of OTs over his teaching year, particularly in the last 10 years.
So let's have the conversation that we had earlier. What Chinese food? What are you talking about?
No, not that kind of walk, different kind of walk. She said even just a taped area on the floor or the carpet that anybody in the class can get up and walk around. That's the walk box, a little place to move. Somebody in the chat box mentioned a stationary bike. If you have access to one, that's awesome.
Yeah, get a parent to donate one, because every parent has one and they never use it. So, connect before you direct. Like you're giving them instruction and you can tell that they're not looking. And so ask them to look at you, or get them one-on-one, or Dawn has to
I do it all the time. I say, I just need all your attention for just a minute, or excuse me, look at me. Okay. And then I ask my question. So then I know that he hears. And
all kinds of senses. The more senses, the better. Now this is with those students that have ADHD. The problem is if you have students with sensory problems, then this is bad. But generally, if you have auditory, visual, and kinesthetic, generally that's gold, even with those that have multisensory problems, because they can pay attention to one or the other.
So fidget toys are not something that Danny grew up with. It would be chewing on his pen, or taking the cap off, or clicking it,
or spinning it
like
Sharon's
doing, right? But there are a lot of fidget toys on the market, and some might drive you crazy, but some are, I think, very successful.
I've never tried this one. I don't know. But that's what our occupational therapist daughter recommended, like rocking chairs or standing desks or whatever. So we all know sitting on an exercise ball, or specially designed rocking chairs. She's an occupational therapist, so
they're
she
not
knows all
like,
this.
rock your baby rocking chairs, but I'm sure you're familiar.
Yeah, Ellen. I think it's Ellen. It's kind of a weird, maybe her last name's, I don't know who it is. Anyway,
Last comment, yeah.
I don't even know if it's a woman. Anyway, they say that get her son looking at her, and all of a sudden they can hear it. So we're out of time. We have 1 minute left. I'm just gonna whip through these. These are from my last session, and they're probably in my next session, because they're just so important to really understand how they learn best, to use a variety of methods we've already talked about, and then to spice up lessons, and to model, to show here's how you do it. Let me show you. I'll do it. Okay, let's all do it together. Okay, now you do it on your own. I'm going to say that I've gotten a lot better through the years. That's all that was. And here's a list of resources. So thank you for attending this session. I'll stay for a few minutes if there's more questions or more talk, and you're free to go. Please take a picture of the resources before you go, but thank you so much.
And B, I love that small piece of Velcro on the side of their desk as a sensory fidget, either the soft or the scratchy one.
Ooh,
That's really
yeah.
non-intrusive
I would
to
like
the
that.
class. That's great.
As soon as we started talking about fidget toys, I started playing with Gertrude. I'm like, oh yeah, that feels good. Okay, anything else? Teacher is a person who helps you solve problems you never knew you had without them. I love Taryn. She just laughs at all my jokes. What did I tell you? She's awesome.
It was bad when I worked at a comedy club because I'd be in the box office just cackling through the show.
That's awesome.
It's great to have you. You're a wonderful moderator. Thank you so much, Taryn. Thank you, everybody.
Working with you.
Thank you, everybody that's still here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your thank yous, everybody who's thanking.
And we wish you nothing but success.
Yes. Thanks, Donna. That was good.
Lots of thanks in the chat.
Yeah. And Taryn, do you remember any questions that we missed?
Honestly, I think we got to all the questions.
Oh, good. Good.
For sure. Yeah. There were some little comments here or there, or people sharing personal tips and stuff with each other,
Yeah.
but we covered all the questions for sure.
Yeah, they
Right.
could read those other comments.
And
but-
Danny made a little faux pas in that he said ADHD students a few times. And what he meant was students
with
with
ADHD.
ADHD. That they are
yes.
not defined by that. That is not who they are.
Thank you,
It's,
Donna.
it's hard having to be cognizant of all the different language and lingo that we use and making sure that we are being inclusive with it.
Yeah.
For sure.
And Robin, yeah, best wishes to you.
I just read it. I can say you're welcome, Robin. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, which is really fortunate for you, Robin, that every one of these things, like every single kindergarten child can be diagnosed, right? So,
Wow. And Danny, I was just moved to kindergarten 2 weeks ago.
Wow. But what fun, hey?
It's been a whirlwind of emotions, but it's working out really good, I think, for everyone involved.
Good. So much work. I think kindergarten teachers are the most underappreciated teachers on the planet, really. But so vital.
yeah.
I
And
had no idea until I walked in that classroom, man.
yeah, if you love them, they will just blossom. So good
Yeah.
for you.
Jody Carrington's stuff is gold for kindergarten, isn't it? Like just right on the money.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If Robin, if you're still there, I'm so I echo what Donna said. Thank you for being a kindergarten teacher.
And keep doing the good things you're already doing. So that's
Yeah.
great.
Right.
All right, on to my next session. my
Yes,
last
good
session.
luck in the rest of your day, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks for being a moderator and being my moderator, Taryn, because I just love teaching you, and that's what I was able to do. So it was awesome.
Well, I was paying attention and I loved every minute of it. So thank you.
Well, thank you for responding so well.
Yeah,
Because it makes it feel like there's an audience.
and
So-
it makes me better. So thank you for making me better.
I absolutely understand that. Have a good day, guys.
Bye.
Bye.